and welcome to a very special Film Ireland podcast in partnership with the Galway Film Fleadh, which takes place on the 9th to the 14th of July. Today, ahead of her screening at the festival, we are chatting with artist and filmmaker Inas Halabi about her film We No Longer Prefer Mountains. Thank you so much for chatting with us.
Hey, thank you. It's really nice to be here.
Oh, we're delighted to have you. I'm wondering, where are you based in the moment?
So I'm living now in Amsterdam. I'm originally from Palestine. I'm from Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, and now I'm in Amsterdam, where I live.
I think it's such a beautiful film. It's such a thoughtful film. I think the pacing is so wonderful, and it really leaves an impact when you watch it. I was wondering, before we kind of delve into your work as a filmmaker, I was wondering if we could talk about you as an artist and a filmmaker. Could you tell me a little bit about your past and what brought you here?
So I'm an artist working mainly in film and moving image, also in sound. I've created some pieces where it's mainly sound, where I kind of approach sound as an alternative image. And a lot of my work is focused on how historical narratives are constructed. And in short, how colonial histories continue to impact our everyday. Also sometimes in maybe more subtle ways that are not so visible. So a lot of my research or practice is kind of considering maybe invisible forms of violence in an image. So one example, which I touch upon a little bit in this film, We No Longer Prefer Mountains, is not only how the violence or control that's implemented by the state towards the people, but also towards the landscape. And that's an example of what I mean by invisible violence, where land confiscation, for example, occurs through the establishment of national parks on top of indigenous land, as another form, for example, of land confiscation. So these kind of topics is usually what my work is dealing with, and it's a lot about narrative, also how narrative is constructed, and the relationship also of the history to play. So a lot about the landscape and also the people who inhabit that landscape, of course.
And what about yourself growing up? Your education, where did you sort of learn this? Because it's such a fabulous, I think it's just an abstract way of thinking about it. It's so funny because, again, we're post-colonial country ourselves. I think we only existed since the 1920s, and we only had independence then. And there's so many systems that you can still see it in our society today. And I do think it's looking at that through that other lens, and art is the thing that explains and heals in a way. And I'm just wondering, what was sort of your background? Like, what brought you up to this point, even like growing, like obviously your past, growing up in Palestine, but education wise, and how did you hone your art to be able to focus on this?
Yeah, that's a very good question. First, kind of respond to what you said, like about the situating Ireland also within the. I agree with you that kind of like things continue even like in post-colonial society, like continue not only in Ireland, all across the world in different ways. So it's maybe then to make clear that colonialism is a structure more, which is also kind of the cause of everything that we're seeing happening in the world today. I always kind of connect different geographies under this one system, basically, which is the problem. And about myself, I was born in Jerusalem. It was where I was born and raised and where I lived most of my life. And I studied visual arts there for 4 years. I was not working with film until later on. I was introduced to that more in my master's, so my second degree studies when I was living in London. So this was when I first started to really work with film, which was in 2012, around that period. So yeah, it's hard to kind of trace, it's like it's a lot of the things that brought me to where I am today. But I think I found my way through the moving image, kind of working with film. It it's the most space that I've felt connected to, where it allows me to sort of really, you have like the image, the sound, all these layers. When you're considering also history, it's a lot about time. Just the material, really gives the space for me to uh, sort of, like first I start with a lot of research, let's say on the ground, conversations with people, archival research. And instead of, for example, writing a book or, I wouldn't be able to kind of maybe narrate or say the things I want to do, or also collaborate with people in the way that I want to in other mediums. Of course you can, like you can write a book and then you're interviewing people. But it's a very different case. Yeah. Like for me, it's more the relationship between the image also and the sound to the place, to a certain situation.
That was so interesting, and I'm very fascinated by your processes. So, for like going into a film like this, and it's like an avant-garde concept about processing landscapes. Do you go in knowing what it's going to look like, or is the part of the process making it? Like, are you discovering it as you go?
Yeah, I mean, one of the drives, the main drive, basically, when I'm making a new work of film is questions that I have, which sometimes some questions are answered, but a lot of times there's also new ones that arise. Of course, like at the starting point, I already know a little bit, but the reason why I want to delve more deeply, like for example, with We No Longer Prefer Mountains, which focuses on the Druze minority in 1948 Palestine. So it's more about the particular condition that they have as a result of the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. So different laws were constructed or put in place to kind of control the Druze. So I knew the starting point, but I wanted to delve in a little bit more deeply. And also, by making the film, it was a chance for me to maybe strengthen some relationships that I already had, but also establish new ones, both with the community and with the surrounding landscape. So, for example, I knew about the national park that I mentioned at the beginning. It's Israel's largest national forest, called Carmel Forest, which surrounds the two villages where the film takes place. So I knew about this forest, but I didn't know details that it was planted on top of 8 demolished villages. I knew example about one of them. So there's a lot of things that brought me closer also to this landscape that I was a little bit familiar with already. I didn't grow up in this region, but my father, for example, belongs to this community. This was like a personal connection. But I was an insider and outsider in this place. So, like I had a starting point, but there was a lot that I didn't know and that I got to explore and, found answers to some questions by making the film. And as I said at the beginning, also other questions, remain a bit unanswered. It's a way also to really strengthen a relationship with people and establish new relationships as well to the community. So this is kind of one of the driving forces usually behind making a project. And in this specific case, this film, and a lot of the conversations also, of course, not everything enters the film as well. So there are a lot of people who helped shape the film, but we don't see them immediately on the screen, but they are there in the background, They helped form my research, in different aspects, different ways.
So you're researching the film. You At what point do you know you're ready to go out with your camera? And do you have a crew that you would go out with? Or I know in one interview you said it's like your camera is the extension of you, so I presume you're filming yourself, which like what is your process there? Do you go out on the road? Do you have everything lined up as you go, or are you finding things in the moment?
Yeah, well, I think since I'm not living most of the time in Palestine, so I do visit, I do go back there 2, 3 times a year. Most of my projects, my research and my films have taken place in Palestine, most of them. But not living there, every day throughout the year also influenced a little bit, influenced the process. Let's say in pre-production, at the research phase, location scouting, locating, meeting the people, building the contact. So I always start with, there was a couple of research trips. Like I worked on this film for almost 3 years, on and off. And I would usually try to spend at least 1 month to 2 months in Palestine. So at the starting point, I was traveling a lot there myself, alone, or I would bring a friend with me. So at the beginning, I was not working so much with the crew. I had a production assistant. So we were mainly 2 people. And I would start a lot with recording sound. I usually start off actually before I film, I just record sounds. And mainly I focused on the landscape. And then establishing contacts. So, through meeting one person, I would kind of look for my contacts based on themes, certain questions that I had. So when it was around land confiscation, there was someone who worked in the land committee. So I met with him. When I was kind of interested more in different forms of resistance, maybe a different perspective of the Druze community, I was introduced to someone from a collective. They're called Urfod. We also see them in the film, who they support Druze who refuse to serve in the Israeli army. They provide emotional, legal support. And one thing led to another. But at the beginning, I start off with sound. I do film also a little bit myself, but I was filming more the landscape at the beginning. So I never filmed the people who I collaborated with, who we see in the film from the beginning. And it was a lot of trying to spend as much time as I could in the situation that I was in, where I was not living there for the whole year, but just taking my time as much as possible. And I think, also learning from the past, it's really important to establish trust and also communicate, exactly how the film is going to be made, why you're having a conversation with someone. And I guess kind of thinking about how I would want to be approached also if someone was going to film me, because it's not a very natural thing also, to be on camera, to be filmed or recorded. There's something actually a little bit violent in it, not by the violence that I mean, but more that you're kind of capturing someone's image and voice, and then there's the editing process later. So it's a lot about trust and also understanding. The more you spend time in a place, I think you also better understand, and to try to really also break as much as possible, to break kind of preconceived, notions or ways of thinking about a specific place, which is quite difficult to do, but sort of to try to see it from a different perspective than your own, especially when it's a different political perspective. And in the end, nothing is neutral, So of course, I had my own position also as the maker of the film, but tried to kind of open up spaces for different things to happen. It was in different phases. At the beginning, going there with my production assistant and starting off with recording sound. And then eventually, yes, I did work with a crew. So it was me and the DOP filming. We had 2 cameras. I had one sound recordist, Aruna. The DOP is Ashraf. Production assistant is Aline. And then it was me. And there was other people also helping, friends. But it was quite a small crew. And initially, I actually wanted it to even be smaller, just me and a sound recorder. More to try to allow different things to happen. The way the film was made, there was also not a script. So it was, of course, structured in a certain way. I did already have an idea of how, it would start, the middle part, the end. But it wasn't a script, where I'm not working with actors. I, of course, would know what the topic would be that we're going to discuss, but I wouldn't always know. Actually, I would never really know what's going to be said. But I would have a little bit of an idea about the, who I'm speaking to, and also their perspective, because in almost all cases, except one, I had already spent a lot of time with the people before filming. That was very important for me, not to come immediately with like a recorder and a film and, start the film, because that's, not the way I wanted to do it.
And did you find,
Long answer.
yeah, no, no, I love this.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. It always spins off these sub questions that I'm fascinated by. When was this filmed? When was the bulk of this shot?
The filming itself or the research?
The filming.
The filming was done in 2 phases. I would say 2 or 3 phases. Uh, in 2020, it was actually impacted a lot by COVID. There was a lot of, now it feels like it was so long ago. It's just so I started the research 2019. I filmed a little bit in 2020, then we postponed. And 2021, I managed to start filming with the crew. And then I left the material kind of for half a year before I started editing. Then I went back again in 2022 to film in one house again. I wanted to kind of have a conversation that I didn't have a chance to have before, mainly because of COVID and a few other things on the side. And then I also wanted to film the landscape a bit more, in particular the mountain. I was interested to try to capture shots of the mountain kind of from far, which in the film in the end we don't really see so much. We're kind of usually actually always in the middle of the mountain. So yeah, it was 3 phases, the main one being 2021 of the filming. And then the editing took place in 2022.
Sorry, are you still in touch with everybody? Are you in
With
contact?
everybody in the film?
How are they doing?
Yeah, I'm in contact, not with everybody. Not with every single person in the film. No, but yeah, still like in contact, not on a daily or weekly basis. But there are some people in the film that I'm much more in contact with. Yeah, especially my Sam and her mother, Khaltoon Nijma. They are okay. I mean, not so. You mean because of the situation,
Yeah.
or generally?
Like both.
Or both?
I think one
I
definitely
mean, I think
impacts the
nobody's
other.
really so okay. Yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah. It's like if you ask me about my family, or, I mean, in terms of safety, they're pretty safe, as is the case also in Jerusalem. For the most part, yeah. So it's of course very different than in Gaza. It's nothing close to that. But yeah, for the most part, I think they are okay. Sadly, there's one person who collaborated, who was with me in the film, Amon Najib. He was a religious figure and also a farmer in the film. And he passed away a year and a half ago. And I didn't get a chance actually to see him again after filming. So that was very sad. I'm still in touch. Like, I know his family and his son. He didn't get to see the film also finished, so that's actually, kind of hurts a little bit in a way, that you want to share, the result with someone and they're no longer there. Also because he's kind of a pretty important figure in the film. But most of them I am in touch with. There's one person, for example, though, like the judge that we see in the film, like my relationship with him after the film didn't really continue. Not because anything good or bad happened, it was just naturally was the case. I think we just have also very different perspectives. And this was also actually the moment in the film that needed the most permission for, I really had to write letters because it was filmed kind of in the court, and they like establishing trust there was quite tricky. Yes.
And it's an interesting perspective to have in the film. Like it is interesting to watch, especially for us. Did you like watching this film probably around the time when you finished it? Do you feel the meaning is much weightier now for people?
Um, I'm not sure if it changed so much, sadly. I mean, I think because, yeah, what we're seeing now, it's kind of a continuation of actually something that was already there, of course, on a much, much larger scale. And in terms of, the film is really looking at the political condition of the Druze and how that was, like how their identity was constructed, but also the way the state of Israel has controlled them for the last 8 decades, and more so why. So kind of really looking at it that it's a continuation, let's say, of the imperial strategy of divide and rule, divide and conquer, to try to ensure separate the Druze from the rest of the indigenous community. And which is still continuing now. I think, like, I can't speak in the name of all the Druze, but it's something that's still not resolved. So if it's weightier, your question in terms of like how, yeah, maybe how the film now is situated with everything going on, I think maybe the main thing is like a lot of the Druze, the male Druze, they're forced to serve in the Israeli army. So by Israeli law, like if you're Jewish, you're forced to serve in the Israeli army. And this is the only exception, kind of. So it's a law that was created in 1956. So, I'm sure there are still Druze serving in the army now. And so with everything going on, it becomes a little bit more, not a little bit, much more also, I don't know which word to use, like absurd or, because Druze usually, like, let's say if you grow up in Jerusalem, where I grew up, we don't pass checkpoints inside Jerusalem. But if I was going to go to an area called Ramallah, which is not so far away, and it's considered to be the West Bank, let's say, like Palestinian territory. So there's a checkpoint that separates Jerusalem from Ramallah. And on these checkpoints, I would say like around 90% of the time, the soldiers that are placed there are Druze. And it's a little bit of a, absurd kind of surreal situation that you have someone who is Arab, you're Arab, but then they're speaking to you in the language of the colonizer, and they're basically harassing you on different levels. And so now with everything going on, of course, that's where it's weightier. But then the film was also looking at other forms of resistance, or sort of the perspective. There are many Druze who are also not serving in the army because it's mandatory. So if you don't go, you have to serve in prison. And I think now there are much more Druze who are not serving, but I can't say exactly what the number is and what the situation is like. But I think in general, like any film that was made in Palestine now that's looking into the political situation, whether it's like kind of, in my case, focusing on a specific condition in order to look at the larger situation, there are different ways of doing this. Again, as I said at the beginning, like it didn't change so much. It just got worse. I think everything just came to the surface, what was already there. So now manifests on a much larger scale. Because again, it's a structure that's there, Zionism and apartheid, all these things. But yeah, in terms of the Druze, if a Druze is still serving, in the army, with everything going on now, it's quite disturbing. So it was already disturbing before, but then it would even be more disturbing from my perspective. Yeah.
That it is so, because it does, I think that's one of the things the film really explores is that identity. And I think you and there's so many parallels to us and our culture in this film as well. Like our natural, we've such mysticism in like our entire like environment has been colonized. Like Ireland was a forest and now it's completely farmland. It's been completely deforested. Like there's so much, I think when you're watching this, that really like speaks to the heart of that situation, and even that shift in identity where, our language was taken away, um, like the language of the colonizer, like how we hold on to it, but then yet, like there's certain indoctrinations that are there. And I do think like even the fallout in our own hierarchy, there's very much so a hierarchical system that's been built into all the institutions that remains. That's us. Like we're doing that now. That's unconsciously in who we are and how we work. And I kind of think you can see like there's so many parallels. I think what's heartening is, and one of the things that like towards the end of the film, when you see the resistance, I think, you're kind of on tenterhooks for so long watching it. And it's such a almost sensual exploration of the landscape as well. Like you're really immersed as a viewer in it, and how it's presented is lovely. The pacing is so slow. It's like a journey, but I do think the resistance at the end, and that explanation and being in the room, it's just a wonderful journey to observe. And I know, so this is screening at Galway. I know it'll really have a home there.
Yeah, I'm really happy to also be showing the film at Galway, also in Ireland for the first time. Uh, Precisely for all the things also that you said, like the parallels that are there, and just generally being in Ireland right now. So it's lovely to have a chance to show my film in that context.
How has it been received? So did you notice there's more of a sort of a hunger for it now, the way things are, or was it always doing a steady sort of festival run?
Yeah, I think um, up and down. It was first shown at Hot Dog in 2023 in May. Then I showed it a few more festivals. And then more recently, I wouldn't say that it changed so much, but this year I was, in terms of like Palestine, I did show it in two festivals that were specifically, it was like the Toronto Palestine Festival, and then there was another festival in Dubai, the Real Palestine Festival, which was also focusing mainly on Palestinian filmmakers. So I wouldn't be able to answer that so smoothly, like if now, because of now, it's being picked up more. I think also the type of film that it is, I wouldn't see it, for example, at a film festival like Sundance or something, or, like I didn't apply to this festival. I didn't submit to many of these festivals. I still actually haven't shown it in Palestine yet. I'm also waiting for a moment for that to happen. So it hasn't been screened in a lot of places that I would like to actually screen it. But it is like it's planned, so it will happen. Yeah, and I think maybe in conversation shifted a little bit. I recently showed it in Belgium. It was just a one-time screening in a cinema, and in the Q&A, maybe like the certain types of questions. I feel it's also questions that I wouldn't really know how to answer in terms of like Druze today serving in the army, and if they are serving, for example, in Gaza, or yeah, because the film also, I wasn't trying to whitewash the Druze to make them look, the position better, or in the other way around. So it was just kind of like giving space really for the community itself to share the impact, basically, of all these laws and the control, all these kind of power structures that they're living under. So yeah, there's plans to show it now in a few more places and a few more festivals. But it's quite a particular kind of also film. And, it has a little bit of a slower pace also. I feel like it's not in a bad way, not in a negative way, but more,
Art
it takes its
house.
time, I think.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not suitable also for everyone. Yeah. Yeah.
But I do think like there's such a kind of deep emotion at its core, but like that as well, it explores so many different ideas and concepts, and gives such a kind of a different view, but it still feels quite like personal to the people that we do spend time with. Um, and I'm wondering as well, how does this sit in the context of your other work? Um, is this sort of a natural progression of themes that you like to explore? Is this sort of a passion project that you would have been planning for, like, obviously since 2019, but like that you would have been like, I'm going to do this? Is this something that you found through other projects? And how is this sort of leaning into your work going forward?
Yeah, so my previous project, so for this is my first feature film. So my other films have been shorter, let's say around, the longest was maybe around 20 minutes. So it's my first feature film, and I had not a very, very large budget, but larger than before, that allowed me to sort of take my time a little bit more. And maybe from previous works, I also learned, and I'm also kind of taking that forward, of how important it is, like the impact of spending more time in a place and with the people. I feel like I did that a lot, maybe enough in this film, but it could have been in some moments I could have also um, spent more time there, had more conversation. Uh, but yeah, it's always the case, like you're always kind of thinking of maybe like what's missing, but then kind of like the story is still there. My previous works, um, they're quite similar. I mean, it's different. Like I didn't make, this is a very specific film that it's about the condition of the Druze community. But in my other films, I still did spend time with a community. Like I would be interested maybe in a specific place, and then also the community that's living there. So like I had a shorter film that was looking into uh, Bedouin communities in Palestine that remain unrecognized, for example, by the state of Israel. I didn't finish that film. It's still actually in the making. But then I spent time, there's 32 unrecognized villages. I spent time in 2 villages. I had conversations, and filmed. And yeah, because it's a lot, like I kind of consider the landscape to be like its own living archive in a way that carries all the history, also the violence in it. And also the as I said before, like the people that inhabit this landscape and how all this also impacts them. But yeah, and then I have another, like a film from 2019, for example, where it actually focuses more on the landscape. It's a collaboration with a nuclear scientist. He was kind of doing research around areas in Palestine in the south of the West Bank that have high levels of radioactivity, radiation. So in this film, for example, there was a collaboration with him where I, in the end, visited some of these places. It's a little bit more experimental. Like there's the use of like red filters in the film. In terms of narrative also, that's also where it's more experimental. It's much more chopped up. So in a sense, actually, this feature film is my most work that I guess it would be situated more under like documentary in its approach, which I wasn't thinking about it as a documentary when I was making it, but it sort of did take that style and approach. So from that sense, it is quite different from previous works of mine. But yeah, it's always been about the landscape and people that inhabit that landscape. And at the moment, I am working on a new film. It's actually research also that I've been working on for like the last year and a half. Which the film that's showing now in Galway kind of touches upon it a little bit. So my research now is looking into Israeli national parks that were created established on top of demolished Palestinian villages. So we no longer prefer mountains. We hear a conversation actually a little bit at the beginning and a little bit in the middle of the film. It's always kind of the viewers reminded a little bit of how these national parks have erased, let's say, or continue to erase by like the trees that continue to grow there, trees that were planted on top of demolished villages. So it's kind of like a violence that's still continuing. But I was very interested, still am,
And non-indigenous trees, that's it. That changed the ecosystem.
Yeah, non-indigenous trees, exactly. Pine trees that were, exactly. So these are specifically pine trees that were imported in the 20th century, which are not indigenous to the region. And also they're very flammable. Like when a fire happens, they burn really, really fast and the fire spreads quite, uh, uh, um, like it's very hard to control. No, let's say in terms of acidity, like I'm going to too much now. So it's something I'm working on at the moment, but it's a continuation of my research for the last, I would say, like 5 years. As I said, like at the beginning, this invisible form of violence in the landscape. So it's a violence that we don't immediately see, maybe in an image. You know, like in the film, I'm pointing the camera at this national forest in front of these lush trees. That's very beautiful. You know, like you can go on a hike there. The air smells really fresh and clean. But these trees were also important. Someone in the film also, Mount Carmel, says that at the beginning. He tells us which are the indigenous trees, you know, like the oak tree, the pomegranate, the olive tree. And then he mentions how the pine tree is not indigenous and it's foreign, and that it was brought over to Palestine in the 20th century by this a charity, it's a Zionist organization that was established in the 20th century called the Jewish National Fund. But really, like, there's nothing Jewish about it. It just uses kind of this image for other purposes, basically Zionism. So it's very important to differentiate those two things. And under this kind of structure, until today, they continue to do this, to establish national forests, you know, and you can also now go into the website of the Jewish National Fund and decide that you want to plant a tree. And I think most of the trees are planted actually by foreign donors who don't really know where these trees are being planted, you know, that a lot of them are on top of demolished Palestinian villages. So not every single forest, but many of them are, like it's 2/3 actually of them. So yeah, and we no longer prefer mountains. We hear a little bit about this, and I've decided now to really focus on this for a new project that's looking specifically at the establishment of national park. So now I'm kind of in the research phase of it, doing location scouting, recording sound also. Yeah.
And I think it's definitely the time. I think people are so much more aware of ecology and that, like, the systems and how disrupted they are with climate change, which is again like another, like, you know, like another kind of act of violence against our environment. That's really kind of been propagated by like powers and that kind of like individualist mentality instead of, you know, like sustainability is about accepting everything and about working in a way that works well for everybody. But it is, yeah, I think it's just things. It's really being brought to the consciousness now how integrated all those issues are and how really like it's going to affect everybody. So in the long run, like every single person on this planet, no matter what you believe or your background, is going to be affected by when these systems start to break down. So I think it's such an important message. I will very much so look forward to it. And I kind of think, are you going to come over to Galway? Are you going to come to Ireland?
Yes, I'm flying there actually in a few days on Tuesday, my flight. So I'm really excited. It's my first time also visiting Ireland, which I'm very, very excited about. So I'll be there for a few days. Yeah. So really nice
Brilliant.
Opportunity.
Thank you so much for chatting about your film.
Thank you so much.
And thank you so much for listening. This film is screening on Wednesday, the 10th of July at 4 o'clock in the Town Hall Theatre, and you can get your tickets now at galwayfilmfleadh.com. And make sure not to miss any reviews or podcasts and subscribe to the newsletter on filmireland.ie.